top 15 behavioral interview questions and answers. That's what I'm covering in this video, so stick around if behavioral interview questions are a struggle for you. By the end of this video, you'll have the top common behavioral interview questions and answers. So that includes solid example answers that you can take away and use in your interview, including how to use the STAR method, how to structure your answers, and tons of freebies and resources to help you pass your interview. If you're new to the channel, I'm Amri Celeste, an interview coach. You can connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn, both Amri Celeste. If you're not new to the channel, then I hope you're subscribed. If not, then now is a perfect time to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss the next video. So what is the difference between a behavioral, situational, and competency-based interview question? Behavioral interview questions can be a bit tricky because although they are specific questions about areas of your character and behavior, they can still fall into other interview question categories like situational interview questions, which I've covered in this video. I'll link that in the description below. So situational questions are questions where the interviewer is asking you to describe a specific scenario or situation where you took a certain action in order to demonstrate a skill that they want to assess. Behavioral questions can also fall into the category of competency-based questions, which are questions that assess your overall ability or competency in relation to key areas of the role. And I've covered competency-based interview questions and answers in this video, which I'll also link in the description below. So the main difference is that behavioral questions are specific to various behaviors. So for example, your morals, how you handle difficulty and challenges, how you handle conflict or disagreements, your self-awareness, how you interact with co-workers, can you demonstrate empathy? And this is whether you can put yourself in another person's shoes and show some level of understanding. So the reason that these things are important is because most roles involve working with at least one other person in some capacity. So even if you're working remotely and freelancing, someone has hired you, you may need to interact with them at some point. So if you struggle to empathize or to communicate clearly, it can just lead to friction at work because you're not taking into account the additional work that you might be causing to other people or their sensitivities. And in most cases, people whose behaviors align with the company's are just easier and more pleasant to work with for the company. So let's get on with these behavioral interview questions and answers. Question 1 is, tell me about a time you had a conflict at work. Questions about conflict are extremely common. I cover more questions like this in my top 22 common interview questions and answers video, so you can check that out to be fully prepared for common interview questions. I'll link that in the description below. So an example answer is, in my current role, I handle all of the company's marketing and social media. I was asked to write an article for the company website by a senior team member. They wanted this written in a short, concise way that reflected our company tone and brand guidelines. Another member of the team continuously criticized my work publicly, which created an uncomfortable atmosphere for myself and other colleagues, coming across as confrontational and inappropriate. I asked to speak to my colleague privately. Once in private, I explained that I'd worked quite hard and I would appreciate if they were able to communicate their issues to me in private initially. I felt that taking the colleague aside would avoid a public escalation and further increasing the negative atmosphere. They promptly apologized and explained that they didn't realize how their actions came across. They committed to communicate with more sensitivity in future. I got the article published on the company website and I received positive feedback from my manager on the article. Now, I used the STAR method to structure this answer, and I recommend that you use the same structure for these types of questions. If you're subscribed, then you'll have heard me give tons of STAR method examples in previous videos. It's a great way to keep your answer structured, but also to tell a story to the interviewer at the same time, which keeps them engaged. So what is the STAR method? STAR stands for situation, task, action, result, and it can be referred to as the STAR method, STAR interview method, or the STAR technique. So the STAR method is a framework that you can use to structure your answer while covering all of the points that the interviewer is waiting to hear. I cover the top 22 STAR method interview questions and answers in that video. I'll also link that in the description with the rest. So this is how that last answer fits into the STAR method here. The situation is that you were given a task to complete, which was creating the article. The task was addressing the colleague's critique that created an uncomfortable atmosphere. The action was choosing to take the colleague aside and communicate the issue to them, dealing with it directly and head on. The result was getting the article completed and the colleague's commitment to be more self-aware in future. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So this example outlines a co-worker creating conflict with their style of communication, and the way this was handled by you demonstrates your own communication skills and your self-awareness. If you were to snap back at this colleague publicly after the situation is already tense, it doesn't demonstrate that you are able to rise above the confrontational tone, which I can tell you is something that you would need to master working in an office. So showing patience is absolutely critical. Question 2 is tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss. An example answer is, a few months ago, I was delegated the task of updating all of our client databases by my line manager as they were out of date. I needed to make sure that everything was filed correctly, but I also wanted to make sure that it was simple and easy to understand. I decided to color code the database based on year, season, and client responses so we could monitor trends and sell other products. My manager didn't like the change and wanted the data in alphabetical order. They argued that the client details would take longer to find. Once I explained the reasoning behind the change with selling products and monitoring trends in mind, my manager saw the value in color coding client details this way and asked me to create 2 lists, one in alphabetical order and one by year, season, and client responses as I had suggested. I thanked my manager as I thought this was a great suggestion and I created the 2 lists. Now, a lot of people struggle with the question, tell me about a time you disagreed with your boss. So if this is helping you, do click like. It helps the video to show up for more people on YouTube that are searching for help with these types of questions. And there are other ways to support the channel as well. You can buy me a coffee, which is in the description below this video on how to do that. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So this answer demonstrates a really clear timeline of what happened, and most importantly, it includes a specific example. The question is asking about a time when you disagreed with your boss. So one of the most common mistakes that I see is where candidates don't give a specific example. So this answer is strong because it demonstrates initiative here, where it talks about not only wanting to file everything correctly, but wanting to make sure it was simple and easy to understand. This is brilliant to include in your own answer because it shows the interviewer that your focus is making your colleagues' or manager's life easier, which is super attractive in a candidate, and it also shows your reasoning for your next step behind the change that you made. Here it shows your first step is communicating with your manager, where you said you explained your reasoning behind the change that you made. In your own interview, make sure that you make it clear how communication played a part in resolving your disagreement. When answering this, you want to demonstrate that you understand the importance of diplomacy when you're dealing with a disagreement, and it could be with your direct manager or really anyone in leadership. And if you ever disagree, include the fact that you ended on a positive, just like here at the end where it says that you thanked your boss and thought it was a good idea. Question 3 is how do you motivate yourself at work? An example answer is, I've always loved what I do, which is why I've chosen this industry and why I applied for this role. I think that motivation stems from having a genuine passion and interest for what you do. I can understand that even with passion, some tasks can become monotonous if they are repetitive. So what I tend to do is set myself small, manageable goals. This makes the work digestible, but it also gives me a sense of achievement as I work through, complete, and tick off each section. For example, I was working on updating the company website, which I do regularly. I used to just jump in and start the work, but I've now broken the updates down into phases so I can track my progress, such as reviewing the layout, testing the functionality, and so on. Working this way also prompts me to take breaks when I hit milestones. So overall, I believe organizing your work into manageable, bite-sized pieces and a strong sense of purpose is key when it comes to staying motivated at work. Now remember at the beginning of the video when I promised you tons of resources to help you pass your interview? Well, here's resource number 1. This is for you if you struggle with tough interview questions and answers. You can grab a copy of this free guide. This guide is packed with example answers and interview tips for your interview to help boost your interview skills. It also includes answers to difficult interview questions like, why should we give you the job? What's your greatest weakness? How do you handle pressure at work? And similar. I've also included an important bonus question and what to ask your interviewers at the end of your interview. It is totally free. You can get yours by clicking the link in the description below this video. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So I really love that example answer to how do you motivate yourself at work, and not just because I wrote it, but it's a great way of showing off your skills and selling yourself while answering a simple question about motivation. So I've broken this down into parts here. In the first section, you're selling your passion and your interest for your own career, where you say, I love what I do, this is why I applied. This is like gold for an interviewer to hear. It's always nice to hear that someone has a specific interest in what you're hiring for over someone who just wants to work somewhere. It's almost guaranteed that someone who has a specific interest will stay interested and passionate for longer, so demonstrate passion in your answer. If you don't have experience, then you can just use the section that explains your passion for the industry and cut out anything that references why you chose your career path. In the second part here, you're talking about how you stay motivated. And this first section where it says, I understand some tasks become monotonous, which means tedious or repetitive, is important because it shows that you're not trying to circumvent the question. You have a practical and realistic understanding that no matter how much you love something, it can sometimes be boring, but you're explaining it in a professional way. And it's a clear, practical answer where you say, I set myself small, manageable goals, and you explain why you do that and how it links to motivation. So always link it back to the question in your interview. Then in the last part of the answer, I use an example. So if you're subscribed, you'll have heard me bleat on constantly about giving examples, but I do that because they take your answer from average all the way to exceptional in some cases. You don't always need to use the STAR method. You can, but sometimes it can make your answer a little longer, and there are other ways to give a strong example without using it sometimes. Just like here under part 3, the example is clear. It's an example of how you've put what you said into action. It's not just a theory of I make things manageable. You're actually showing how you do that by talking about specific aspects of the goals that you set within a project. So the next question is, how do you handle a challenge? An example answer is, I tend to avoid jumping directly into a challenge unless it's time critical. I like to consider as many variables as possible and do research if necessary before tackling a challenge to make sure that the outcome is most likely to solve the challenge and that it's logical and justifiable. For example, I was working on a presentation that was to be delivered to a large audience. I'm not comfortable with public speaking, and I began to feel more and more anxious as the day became closer. I first did extensive research on the different ways that I can improve my skills and deal with my growing anxiety, as I had less than a week left and I didn't have much time to do a training course or rewrite my presentation. So I decided to focus on what I could do. I dedicated more time to practice than I had initially planned, so I was sure I knew the material inside out. I introduced visual aids to keep the audience engaged and give them something other than me to focus on. I also asked for feedback from a senior manager who regularly gives presentations, and they gave me tips on how to improve my body language. My confidence drastically improved by the time I was due to give my presentation, and I felt more comfortable with what others would be experiencing as they listened to me, and I was more satisfied with my delivery as I practiced and tweaked it until I was comfortable. I delivered the presentation confidently and got excellent feedback from the audience. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So the strength in this answer doesn't actually lie in the actions that you took in terms of practice, visual aids, and also getting feedback. It actually lies in the process that you took to decide that those were the steps you were going to take. So here, I first did extensive research on the different ways I can improve my skills, matches with how you've said that you approach challenges. I don't jump in, I like to consider the variables and do research if necessary. It also lines up here where it lists the things that you didn't have time to do before the presentation, like taking a course, but still considered them as options. In your interview, it's important to show your process and your thinking behind tackling challenges. And when you're sharing your approach and including things like, I break things down into manageable tasks, or I consider all of the options, follow up with an example of you actually doing that. And this is often, as I mentioned earlier, where candidates fall down. They cover a general theory of what they tend to do, but with no example. Question 5 is, how did you prepare for this interview? So this is a tough interview question. An example answer is, I focused my pre-interview prep in a way that might give me some insight as to what the company's known for, what the company might be like, and what questions I might have. I researched the company's history, looked at what you were looking for in this role, and how my relevant experience could add value and advance the business. I also had a look at Twitter for current events, LinkedIn, and the company website. Now, this answer I've actually stolen from the free guide that I mentioned earlier. And the reason is that it's a good answer. It's short, to the point, and most importantly, it works. So all of the answers in my videos are ones that have worked for me, clients, candidates, and subscribers who have got results in the past. And I want them to work for you too. So I always share the answer that is most effective. Now, what's missing from this answer though are areas that you need to elaborate on depending on the individual job that you're going for. And there's so much more that you can do to nail this answer. And you nail it in your prep before the interview, not in the interview. That shouldn't be the first time that you know how to answer a question like this. So I cover advanced interview prep in my interview mastery program. In fact, I have a whole module dedicated to advanced interview prep because it's the difference between an interviewer saying something like, that candidate was the best of a bad bunch, let's just offer them the lower end of the salary and close this role off, and saying something like, we really need to get that candidate, offer them whatever they want. So it's a short program covering combating interview nerves, how to sell yourself, confidence, advanced prep, and practice interviews as well. So there's a link on how to join that in the description below this video. Question 6 is, what makes a good team member? What makes a good team member will vary depending on the team that you're joining. You need to link your answer to the role that you're going into and what will be expected as a team member in that particular team. So let's say that you were going for a role as a marketing assistant. This is an example job description that I created for a marketing assistant. Here are some points that might give clues as to how they want you to operate as a team member, where it states here under key responsibilities to contribute ideas, support the marketing team, assist the social media manager. Then again, under behaviors, where it has not afraid to share ideas and team player, these all indicate that they want someone confident enough to speak up and participate verbally in meetings and share new ideas. Someone who knows how to work with people and communicate in a way that's clear and professional. So if you saw this on a job description while you were preparing, I'm going to assume that of course you do prepare extensively for your interview. Then this is the kind of answer that you might give that would match. I think in order to be a good team member in a role like this, you need a combination of skills. I think you need strong, clear communication skills so that you can communicate new ideas as they come up in a professional way. To be honest, I think that communication underpins most of what would make a good team member in this role, as I think participation in meetings, new ideas, and working to support others on campaigns and new initiatives takes creativity, but you also need to be able to communicate that in a way that keeps others engaged and willing to listen and work with you. I also think being willing to pitch in where needed with a good attitude is critical. Nothing has a more negative effect on a team than having someone constantly bring down the atmosphere. So pitching in where needed and not rigidly sticking to what you do would likely be helpful in a role that seems as fast-paced as this one. So the reason I added on this last part here about being willing to pitch in is because it's normally an unsaid expectation for an entry-level role, and a marketing assistant is fairly entry-level within the marketing space, but of course adapt your answer to the role that you're going for. You're also demonstrating that you understand the environment by mentioning here that the role is fast-paced. I regularly cover tough interview questions and answers, so if you are job hunting, do please subscribe, guys, and leave a comment below, which helps to support the channel and to promote the content to more people. Question 7 is, how do you handle failure? An example answer is, although it depends on what the failure is, I consider myself to be an optimistic person, which I think goes a long way when handling situations or outcomes that haven't gone as planned. I think optimism also helps with being willing to explore what happened and what I could have done differently instead of outward blame. Even if others were involved, I try to look at what I could learn from the outcome. For example, I was leading a small team for an internal communications project. The senior management wasn't happy with what we had drafted, and it really felt like I'd failed. Once I sat with the team to look at what we could have done differently, it completely reframed the feedback we received, and I could understand the manager's critiques. We also drafted a new process for a similar project in future. So overall, we ended up improving our performance through the experience. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? This answer splits your response into sections. So first, you're framing your state of mind when things don't go as planned. I'm sorry that the sun is really bright. Positivity, unfortunately, has been a little overused as a phrase. And so optimism is slightly better as a functional phrase as opposed to a general attitude. So it means hopeful and optimistic for the future. So this is extremely helpful to demonstrate in your interview when it comes to anything related to failure. Then you finish off with a summary example. It's not the full star method, but it is a solid example of how you handled something you initially thought of as a failure. Question 8 is, how do you handle pressure at work? An example answer is, I think pressure is a normal part of the working day. I'm used to working in situations where I suddenly have a high workload or priorities change at short notice. I like to give myself a moment to assess the situation. Although pressure can sometimes mean that you need to act quickly, I don't see pressurized situations as an indication that I need to panic or act without thinking. So if an immediate decision isn't required and it's simply the usual pressure of a deadline being moved forward or a sudden influx of work, I'll assess the best way to go about that first. So that can include things like reprioritizing my workload, creating a new workflow around critical tasks only, considering whether it might be more logical to ask for temporary support from other team members, or whether other deadlines may need to be moved as a result and who I need to notify in that instance. Why is this a good answer and how can I use it? This answer is strong because of the clarity. It's clear what your thought process was when you're under pressure, as well as the actual examples of things that you might do depending on the type of pressure. So you've got variety in your answer for your interviewer. One of the keys here in the first part, where you completely normalize pressure by saying, I'm used to working in these situations. And that's important because if your interviewer asks you that, it's probably a job that is pressurized or can include periods of time where you'll be under pressure. So it's important to demonstrate that working under pressure is not an alien concept to you. It's normal, you can handle it. And this part here where it says, I suddenly have a high workload or priorities change, indicate that you genuinely understand a variety of pressurized situations because you're including an example here. Same here where you've got, this can include things like reprioritizing work, creating a new workflow. These are easy, clear, and simple ways to give an example without having to use the entire STAR method. Question 9 is, what is your greatest achievement? Greatest achievements can be anything from a university degree, particularly if you were doing that while working, looking after someone, or another commitment. That demonstrates the ability to work under pressure as well as perseverance. But it can also be something that you've achieved at work, like a promotion or multiple promotions, taking on a large responsibility that you've never had before, like arranging a big complex event. So think carefully about how your achievement might tie into the job that you're going for, and I'll give you an example of how that would work in this example answer. My greatest achievement to date would have to be the organisation of a community cleanup volunteer project. I volunteer in my personal life. It's one of the things that attracted me to this company. I noticed that you have volunteer days and work with local environmental projects. I was really excited when I was able to bring that passion of mine into my last role, because I was asked to put together a quarterly volunteer project. And this involved coordinating and leading a team of about 50 volunteers. And it took a significant amount of planning, communication, and leadership in order to pull off the event. I was really proud of our efforts, and as a group, we were able to make a notable difference in our local area, particularly in 2 local parks and the local beach, as well as bringing together a diverse group in the community to get involved. The success of this project wasn't just measured by the number of volunteers, but also by the outcome of the event, the feedback from the community and the satisfaction of everyone who participated. It was an incredibly rewarding experience and one that has had a lasting impact on me. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? With this answer, you can see here how you're verbally linking your achievement example to the role where it says it's one of the things that attracted me to this company. I noticed that you volunteer and you work with local projects. In your interview, even if you're using an example that seems clearly linked to the company, make it easy for the interviewer. It's something that I always say, never assume that the interviewer knows. State the obvious in a professional way and verbally link your achievement to the role, the team, or the company, just like in that answer. Question 10 is what motivates you? This one is tricky because it's almost critical that this answer matches the role that you are being interviewed for. So it will take a bit of work on your side to make sure that you fully understand the role and the job description. So this is one of those questions where you don't want your answer to be at odds with the role, but it happens so commonly. So let's just look at this example job description that I created for a call center rep. I'm going to give a short example answer that would link with areas of this job so you can see how it works. The first is the very first point under key responsibilities of answering customer queries, then upselling and cross-selling under skills and experience, enjoying a fast-paced environment also under skills and experience, and also interpersonal skills under behaviors. An example answer is, I'm motivated when I'm interacting with others. I've always enjoyed activities that play to my strengths, and that includes customer service and problem solving, which is why I enjoy customer service roles and anything that involves selling and providing a service. I do get a sense of achievement from resolving queries, helping customers navigate new products and services, and having that positive impact on the customer. I enjoy being kept busy, which is another reason I'm attracted to a busy call center role such as this one. Call centers have lots of calls coming in to keep you consistently busy, and I'm motivated when I have lots to do. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? This answer is good because it links closely to the job. It's simple, it's not too long or overcomplicated, but it demonstrates why you are a perfect fit in terms of what naturally motivates you and how the job links with your personality and natural motivations. Question 11 is why should we hire you? Very common interview question. So an example answer is, I think you should hire me because there are multiple areas where I could add value in this role. For example, the job description mentions you're looking for someone who is detail-oriented, organized, and able to work under pressure. I've only been working in finance for a year, but in that time, I've repeatedly maintained complex and critically important spreadsheets for the company that require a high level of concentration and attention to detail. I'm naturally drawn to roles that require a highly numerical level of focus, and I have advanced organization skills. I'm used to tracking and measuring in my personal life. It's how I keep my finances in order. I use spreadsheets to manage my finances and apps to manage my time, and I enjoy bringing that style into my work. I have a solid understanding of basic financial accounting principles and a proven experience of maintaining records and reconciling accounts. I've also gained experience in using systems that are similar to what you've used here. I think my year in finance demonstrates that I learn quickly, and I'd like to continue to build on the solid foundation of skills I've gained, and I think this role would give me the opportunity to do that. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? Now this answer is a bit long, but you don't need to make yours that length, just use the parts that apply to you. So this is a good answer because it's highly linked to the role and it's clear where it's linked. So like for example here, where it says the job description mentions, when you say this, you are demonstrating that you are prepared and read the job description beforehand, but also that you've thought about the areas of the role that match with your skills. So before your interview, please do spend a bit of time with the job description and make sure that you're familiar with it. I cannot communicate the number of people that I've interviewed over the years that have not read the job description beforehand, and this irritates most interviewers. So the other area that is key in this answer is here, when it says, I'm naturally drawn to roles that require. This can be used in your answer. So take this phrase and apply it in your own interview. Replace the rest with what you're naturally drawn to. That is also in the role. So for example, let's say that it was a PA or secretary role. It could be, I'm naturally drawn to or gravitate towards this type of role because I'm naturally organized. And then you would go on to explain how you're organized because that would be relevant to that type of role. For example, so let's say it was a PA or secretary role. It could be, I'm naturally drawn to or gravitate towards this type of role because I'm naturally organized, and then go on to explain how you're organized because it would be relevant to that type of role. Question 12 is, describe a time when you help someone. An example answer is, we recently had a new starter in finance. I work in HR, and this person's role meant that although they were in finance, they would spend some time on HR systems. Our HR team had a manual for new starters to read through to understand the system. This new starter really struggled to understand how to apply the instructions in the manual. I could see they were struggling. Although I was working on a busy project, I offered to schedule some time in with them for an hour a week so that I could run through the system until they were confident enough to stop with our catch-ups, as I felt that that hour would make a significant difference to how quickly they were able to learn. They've now been at the company for 3 months and they're using the system comfortably, and we've also become friends and regularly go to lunch. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? This is a simple example of carving out some time to help someone. So the example that you use doesn't have to be at work, preferably it would be, but the type of examples you can use are things like helping someone who was struggling to put together a presentation, helping a new team member navigate systems and processes, maybe covering a shift when someone suddenly needed time off at short notice. Question 13 is, how do you evaluate success? So an example answer is, I tend to set goals. I make sure they're clear and measurable, and then I assess my progress along the way. For me, success is not just about meeting targets, but also the process of continuous learning. For example, I previously set a goal to increase sales by 15% across 3 months. I broke that down into smaller milestones, like increasing website traffic and conversion rates, and regularly tracked my progress. Then I celebrated small wins along the way, like reaching a milestone or receiving positive customer feedback. The outcome was a 20% increase. So when I went back to evaluate my success and compare it with my original goal of 15%, I realized that I had surpassed that goal. I considered that a success, not just because of passing the number that I set for myself, but I also learned a lot about customer behavior, marketing strategies, and teamwork along the way. Why is this a good answer? How can I use it? So what I love about that answer is the structure, and that's the part that you can take away and use here. The first part of the answer here, where you say I tend to set goals, is a clear and direct answer to the question. That first section could technically be an answer on its own. It covers the question. The second section is an example, which is something that I've been saying through most of the video to show in your interview. So try to make sure that you include an example in your interview that is short and impactful about how you evaluate success. So it could be ticking off days on a calendar, working out or meditation, then reviewing that. And that can give a clear example. So one other thing to include is numbers if possible. So numbers add authenticity to your answer. Saying I work out 3 times a week, or I said I would increase customer satisfaction by 10%, it adds specifics, which increases the authentic nature of your answer. Question 14 is, tell me about a time you made a difficult decision. An example answer is, I was working on a project last year with a small team. We were allocated this project by senior management who made sure that we were aware of how critical it was because it was for an important client. This also meant results needed to be of very high quality. We split various tasks among the team, but one team member was not following through on their commitments. They didn't contribute ideas in catch-ups. Their work was also very low quality. This was causing delays and putting unnecessary pressure on the rest of the team to correct incomplete work. I tried speaking directly to the colleague, but there was no change. I had to make a difficult decision on whether or not to report this person to a manager, as I didn't want to get my colleague into trouble. But in the end, I decided that this would be the best course of action. I explained the facts and included specifics of what was causing the issue. The manager addressed my colleague directly, and after a discussion concluded that they were not suitable for this project. This result lifted a weight from the rest of the team and made a huge difference to the team's performance and the overall project success. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So for this answer, I use the STAR method, which I mentioned earlier. Why? Because this answer is asking about a time when you made a difficult decision. Emphasis on time. This means they want a specific example, and the STAR method ensures that you will include a well-rounded, comprehensive example. There are 2 key parts to pay attention to with this answer. So the first is here under task, where you clearly outline the factors that pushed you to be in a position where you had to make a difficult decision. The team member didn't contribute, low quality work, causing delays and extra pressure. In your interview, just make sure that you clearly outline what led up to your decision. So the second area is here under action, where it explains why the decision was difficult. You didn't want to get the colleague into trouble. The last area, and the most important for you to include, is here at the end, where it shows that the result lifted a weight from the rest of the team and had a positive impact on the team's performance and the project outcome. In your interview, when you're answering this, it is critical that you don't just stop after explaining the decision. You need to verbally outline the positive outcome so it shows why your decision was worth making. The next question is, how would you deal with a difficult customer? Even though this is a how question, I highly recommend using the STAR method to clearly demonstrate how you would deal with a difficult customer or how you have done it, because it gives the interviewer a solid scenario to work with. So an example answer is, as a customer service rep, I sometimes get calls from angry customers. I received a call recently from a customer who was angry and upset about a delayed delivery. Their item was for a wedding and they were furious that it hadn't turned up and started to use profanity. I needed to diffuse the situation, find out what happened to their order, and calm the customer down. I acknowledged how frustrating it is not to receive an order for such an important event. I reassured the customer that I would find out what happened to their order, but I also let them know that if they did continue to use profanity, I would need to disconnect the call, as this was our company policy. I found out that there was a mistake in the customer's delivery address. The door number was incorrect and the item had been delivered to a neighbor, which meant that the customer could go and immediately recover their order as it wasn't far. The customer was immediately much calmer and they apologized for their behavior. They explained that the wedding was for a family member, so they were under a lot of pressure. They thanked me for my patience and my help. They then went online and left positive feedback about me by name on the company website. So why is this a good answer and how can I use it? If you've worked in customer service, call center, complaints handling, or similar, angry customers are really common. This answer demonstrates that you understand the boundaries that you need to set with difficult customers. So when you mention warning them about using profanity in this answer, However, the warning is mixed in with you reassuring them and letting them know the steps that you're going to take to try to help them. Your answer needs to demonstrate that kind of patience, balance, and professionalism. So do include an example of when someone was irate and what you told them to reassure them and to calm them down as well. And of course, include a positive result or outcome. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Let me know what you need help with in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.